We're here to talk about forgiveness. And now I want you to start off by, first of all, framing the issue here. So why is forgiveness such a hard thing? For some of you, it may be easy, but we're talking about for some of us who have found it difficult and have struggled with it. Here's some things that will help you to, first of all, get into the DNA of what is actually the root of the issues around being able to be free to forgive and forget. Right? We all heard the term forgive and forget, but why is it so hard? So essentially, it has to do with pain. Pain occurs in two forms, broadly speaking. There's physical pain that happens to your body, right? You get bruised, you get hurt, you get heat stroke, you get burnt, etc. So those are all things that are physical. Those are things that happen to the body. But then there is the secondary aspect. There's another aspect, a more inner aspect, which is emotional pain. Now, the two could be related or not, right? Sometimes there's physical pain that then translates into emotional pain. Now, I want you to notice that there's a difference between the two. And a lot of people don't even understand this, that there's the physical aspect, something happened from the outside. So these are to do with your senses, your five senses and your body, which is the one of the fifth senses, the touch, right? Something happened there. But then there is that membrane. It's very, very subtle. The membrane in which you take that external hurt and make that as internal suffering. And you see, you may not have heard of this until now. You may not have, or probably heard of it, but I never actually put yourself in that perspective when you are going through something called suffering, that this is actually the sequence in which it happens, right? Something happened from the outside, thoughts, words, actions, what have you. And then I felt pain and therefore I suffered. Notice I'm using two words here. And this is very important to understand the distinction between these two. There's pain and then there's suffering. So pain, as there's a famous phrase that says, pain is inevitable in life. Suffering is optional. And again, this is a lesson that we seldom tend to have heard, or even if we've heard, we've ignored it to understand the depth of what that is. So, for instance, pain, physical pain, the external stimulus, happens once, or if it's a chronic condition, that might happen multiple times. But most often, an inflicting of pain happens once. But then guess what? We keep replaying that episode over and over again in our minds, and thereby we create the suffering. You see? So we grow up, and actually our suffering in that trajectory of growing up actually increases. If you notice, even for yourself, think of the time when you were a child. You know, you're playing in the field, you're playing in your backyard, and cousins and neighbors or what have you, siblings, whatever it is. You call each other names, you bump into each other, and 2 minutes later, everything's okay. You're laughing and running around again. But something changes in this process of sophistication. It is process of growing up. And as we grow up, we tend to take things a lot more personally, number one. Number two, we tend to remember them and keep replaying them a lot longer than when we were children. So ask yourself, is this indeed wisdom that we need to be acquiring as we're growing up, or is it the reverse of that? And then we say that we simply cannot forgive. It's because we haven't learned about one fundamental aspect, that the pain that we are feeling internally, emotionally, is something that is self-inflicted. That means I have taken that external situation, whatever it is, and then I've internalized that to cause my suffering. And add to the situation, I am re-hurting myself every time I recall it. Okay. So that's the first lesson. And then I want you to understand that emotional suffering happens in broadly 7 basic ways. So you'll use the words such as, he or she insulted me. Right? He or she said something and I feel insulted. Who is responsible for taking that insult? Who has turned that thing that was said? If you think about it, situations are situations, things are things, words are words. I tend to associate them with the title of good or bad. Okay, so I make that interpretation. So then ask yourself, if somebody said something and I felt insulted, who's responsible? Second, somebody is talking bad, gossiping. Okay, some people are talking about, my best friends, my neighbors, my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, whatever, right? And then we internalize that as suffering. So they are talking something and I'm feeling this pain. Ask yourself then, who is responsible for it? Number 3, the opposite. They're talking about me, but now they're not talking about me, ignoring me. So I suddenly feel left out. By the way, this thing of feeling left out is a very deeply embedded thing into the DNA of the human being. Because there is this natural tendency for us to feel the need to belong. I was reading a very, very interesting, powerful article yesterday about why we don't tend to change our mind when we hear facts, when we hear reasoning. Okay, and so the article, just summarizing it in one sentence, for us, the pain of losing people that we belong to because of our held beliefs is greater than transforming to knowing the truth and following our way of living aligned with the truth. So you see what I'm saying? The pain associated with abandoning the people when we abandon our old way of thinking to us is greater than the pain of living knowing that something is false. So therefore, we will not transform, but we will continue to believe in that hard-held ideas, right? The deeply embedded superstitious or whatever it is, these kind of illusory concepts. So coming back to this point, so feeling wanted, feeling accepted, feeling appreciated, feeling recognized is a very tribal, very primal aspect of our being. So when somebody even remotely feels like is ignoring me, it triggers an alarm system within me because of the tribal nature. And the next one is outright rejecting me. So I feel rejected. Somebody made a statement and I felt like that person has rejected me. Who accepts and who rejects? So where does that sense of vulnerability, where does that sense of feeling rejected actually originate? Ask yourself that question. And the next thing is betrayal. He or she or they have betrayed me. It's one thing to have this trust, but the other thing is to become vulnerable to being able to be taken for a ride, to feel you're emotionally trampled because of that position, that pulpit upon which you have positioned the person or the group of people. And the next one is deceived me. He or she or they deceived me. So I had a opinion, I had a sense of trust in this person, And then I feel they have deceived me. They have let me down and therefore caused me suffering. Ask yourself, where does that equation even begin? And then the final thing is, let me down. I had these expectations of you, but I feel let down. Let down by my child, let down by my community, let down by my team, my colleagues, co-workers, whoever it is, by my spouse even. So then again, ask yourself, where is the root of that suffering? Whatever the person, they are doing the best of their ability. At least they are saying that they're doing the best of their ability. But where does that translate to deception, betrayal, letting down, feeling ignored, feeling rejected, feeling that I've been insulted? So the point of all of this is to realize the responsibility that I have on the sense of suffering that I'm feeling. First of all, to recognize that the suffering is not really caused by the other person. He or they or she are doing what they're doing, but I'm internalizing that and triggering a bunch of emotions that are making me feel let down, hurt, deceived, etc. And then the number one thing, the antidote, the number one thing I need to do in order to take back my power. Because think about what's happening. When I feel all of these sense of suffering, let down, deceived, gossiped on, etc., I feel weak. My personal power is been given away. Who is giving that away? I am. I have translated that trigger to basically weaken my state of being. And so the converse of it is the only person who can strengthen you, the only person who can actually reclaim the power is you. And that comes from this magic word of realizing that I am responsible for how I am feeling. Now, what does the hurt and the suffering, what happens? And what if you don't do anything about it? It has an interesting effect. This pain, the suffering that we internalize and we keep regurgitating lingers in our mind, lingers as a bad taste in our mouth. And then whether you realize it or not, it actually goes on to affect your relationship with other people who have nothing to do with the situation. So somebody walks into your room after you've had this emotional outburst, and you, whether you realize it or not, catch yourself the next time you do this, you will perpetrate your feelings, your bad taste in your mouth on this other person. It's actually, if you think about it, so I am having a sense of sickness. So think about it, right? So I've lost my sense of calm and cool. I've lost my sense of power. So it's a form of a weakness, akin to sickness. So when I'm sick and I eat anything, it tastes bad. It's not that that thing that I'm eating is bad. It's not any different than what it was before when I enjoyed it, but somehow how come it tastes bad today? It's because it's the taste that is lingering based on this previous emotional outburst, this turmoil. So it is to our best interest. It is for our health and for our well-being. It is for the people that we love and we care about. It's for the efficiency and the productivity of the environments, whether it's home or at work or in the community, that we take that burden that we have allowed to sit on ourselves. We have allowed to sit on ourselves. It is important to take the responsibility, realization first, and then transformation. That is, take that off ourselves, to let it go so that I can move on, I can live better, I can have better relationships, I can have better productivity. I can have another focus. I can have my sense of calm and collectedness and be able to execute. Okay. So I'm going to share with you a very powerful technique that will help you to release this burden, this weight that we are carrying from many, many experiences, so many different past hurts, so many different past instances that are, whether it's actively regurgitating in our conscious mind or sitting in our subconscious mind, it's still there. And so I'd like to show you a very methodical process of how we can let go of that past hurt. So before that, I want to just say something that they say God is able to forget my past, but I am unable to forget my past. Why? Why is it so hard to forgive oneself? Why is it that we can we say that God is able to do that very easily? Essentially, my concept of God is love. And love, as we all have heard at some point or the other, is unconditional. Doesn't judge us and say, therefore, I'm going to limit how I feel or how I'm going to respond to you or how I'm going to care about you, how I'm going to look at you based on what you've said, done, and so on. Unconditional. I accept you exactly as you are. So if we can turn that acceptance upon ourselves to unconditionally love ourselves, then a lot of that pain and a lot of that suffering can be let go. So with that said, let us drop into a exercise, a little bit of stretching before we jump into the meditation itself. So I want you to do some simple twists as you're sitting in your chair, sitting on the floor, even standing, whatever your position may be. We can all participate in this. So I want you to use the back of your chair. If you're sitting on a chair, if you're not using a chair, then just even put your hands on your back. And as you're breathing out, I want you to take a nice twist to one side. As you're breathing in, come back to center. Breathing out the other way, twist to the other side. Come back to center as you're breathing in. Let's repeat this a couple more times. Breathing out, and see if you can, as you can exhale, see if you can increase the twist of your spine a little bit more with every twist. Breathing out as you're twisting. And one last time. With your eyes open or closed, I want you to sit back, relax, and follow this guidance. Taking in some deep, comfortable breaths into our belly. This is a meditation called the three directions. As we dive into this meditation, I'll divide the different experiences of suffering that you may have gone through in three categories. To start with, I want you to feel the hurt, abandonment, and betrayal you have inflicted on others. Feel the emotions arise. To the extent that you're ready, release the burden of that suffering. Release it for the healing and well-being of yourself, for everyone on this planet. And ask for forgiveness of that person or people. Now let us send them a blessing. May your sorrow be removed. May your hurt be absolved. And may your troubles be reduced by this forgiveness. Next, feel the hurt, abandonment, and betrayal you have inflicted on yourself. Feel the emotions arise. To the extent that you are ready, release the burden of that suffering. For the healing and the well-being of yourself, your loved ones, and everyone on this planet. Forgive yourself for the hurt, abandonment, and betrayal you have inflicted on yourself. Moving on to the next category. Feel the hurt, abandonment, and betrayal someone else has inflicted on you. Let the emotions arise. To the extent that you're ready, release the weight that you carry of this hurt for the healing of yourself, your loved ones, and all life form on this planet. Let your heart forgive this person or group of people. May I be capable of this forgiveness. May my sorrow be removed. May my troubles be reduced. To the extent that you're ready, let your heart move in the direction of forgiveness. And just whenever you're ready, at your own pace, gradually open your eyes. Let's come back into this circle. And let us sit with this question. If you knew this was the last day, year, what would be important to say and do? If you knew this was your last day, month, or year, what would be important to say and do. So when you feel you're ready, you can share that in the chat window. And also, while I'm reading those, I want you to share your questions in the Q&A window on this Zoom application. So I'm beginning to see some responses because we refuse to, I would genuinely choose to forgive and seek forgiveness. That's great, Deepthi. Diksha says, if this would be last day, month, or year, it would be important to demonstrate love. Very true. First of all, towards yourself. Right? So forgiveness for yourself is such an important thing. And it's a thing that nobody else can do, if you realize from everything that I've been talking about. It's a responsibility that we have not to inflict pain on ourselves, but also to forgive the past pain and suffering that I have internalized and I've held there for a long, long time. And then I'm seeing that how to release the fragments of pain which still remain here and there. So that's the question that I addressed in my meditation. So this is, by the way, this meditation is not something that you did for the last 20 minutes and then you somehow got magically absolved for everything that you have gathered for your lifetime, or may I say even lifetimes, because the soul takes with it, it brings with it from lifetimes, across lifetimes, some of the unresolved wounds. If you can understand what I'm saying, I know that many of people in this world don't believe in this concept of afterlife and the journey of the soul, but just sit with that model for a second. Imagine if this was an infinite timeline that this eternal being called the soul, the conscience, is traveling across, then this concept of one life or the other is really just a different scene. It's a different chapter. So we carry the hurts from the past. I'm not asking you to completely believe in this concept, but I'm just saying, just sit with that paradigm and say, if indeed you're carrying burden from a long, long time ago, then obviously it would take certain repeated practice for you to be able to go and absolve yourself all of the little hurt and pain that was in the question. Okay, so let's see. Veena is saying, it would be sure I ask forgiveness for any hurt that I did to any family and friends and colleagues. How much love and gratitude for those I have in my life. And I guess you could, okay, and what they mean to me, my gratitude for what they have done for me. Wonderful, Veena. And then there's somebody here with a phone number. I can't tell who it is, but they're saying, seek forgiveness from somebody I might have hurt. Okay, wonderful. Gurpreet is saying, just be at peace and be more learned and evolved than when I came onto this earth. Perfect. Yes, that's the whole idea, right? Life is supposed to be a journey of spiritual evolution, and that we learn from past, we learn from our own pain, and then we learn how to grow from it and also help others along the way. Great. And then Dipti says, I do believe in previous lifetimes. Yes. And so if you do, then if you think about it, this is not something that's just going to vanish in 20 minutes with Jay, right? So you're going to have to sit with it. Okay, great. So I'm beginning to see some questions come in, and you're welcome to both type your responses and also put in questions that you want to ask. So the first question says, when you say pain inflicted on yourself, how do we know that it was something we inflicted? So very simple. When I went to the scenarios, the 7 scenarios where I talked about things like betrayal, gossip, I'm feeling rejected, right? So feeling deceived, feeling let down. If all of those things, if you think about it, events are events, but I label them as good or bad. And when I label them, there is an ensuing emotion that arises from me labeling that situation. So all suffering is really self-inflicted. Do you realize that? So there are two parts to it. So like I just go back to the very beginning of this conversation, I said, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. So we tend to take on the suffering through that diaphragm I was talking about, through that membrane through which situations pass from the outside, and this is my inside. And my consciousness is that membrane that allows that passing of this information. And so I, therefore, am responsible first to realize so that I don't add any more suffering, any more agony, any more burden to this already painful situation. But then the second part of it is to let go, to empty that basket, to say that I'm not going to carry this on my head any longer. I've done that for too long and it hasn't served me. Right? So there's both of those two things, both of those aspects are your responsibility to reduce the further infliction through realization, and then through contemplation and meditation, you forgive and let go. So that's how you can realize. So suffering is something that is really, that's your indicator that I'm responsible. I have inflicted this upon myself. Judgment, right? I judge myself and I harshly tend to look at myself in ways that are, I would not do this to other people. You know, some people have this very interesting thing. They do things to themselves that they would never have the heart to do to others. Something that one needs to really very carefully look at. Okay, so there's another question here. My human dignity, how close is it to my ego mind to hold on to these hurts? My human dignity. Well, see, think about it. So that's a great question, by the way, Linda. That's this idea of anything that I attach after the word my is an aspect of ego. I've covered this in previous workshops, right? And I say my nationality, my community, my gender, my race, my identity is all elements of the ego. So it seems like your question already has that wisdom built into it. You're saying, how close is it to my ego? It is very much ego. It's the ego mind that is speaking when I say that this is my sense of dignity, and therefore I felt trespassed. Okay. Now, so am I saying that it is okay to be sitting or living or working in humiliating conditions? No, that's not what I'm saying. Am I saying is it okay to be staying in violent households or workplaces or whatever community, whatever that container may be? No, that's not. I'm not proposing that. What I'm saying is that you allowing the actions of others to become personal suffering is your responsibility. To realize and walk away is wisdom, but to sit there or even walk away from it, but then you're carrying this burden. So I'll tell you a beautiful story. Some of you may have heard this in some of the previous series that I've done a couple of months ago. There was in a forest, 2 monks walking. They're walking on their pilgrimage. And they came to a river, and the river was about waist deep. So they could wade through the river. They could walk through the river. So as they're preparing to do their, whatever they're carrying and their clothes, they're adjusting their stuff. They see a woman, a very small made, petite woman sitting on the side, very scared. And she requests the monks if they can help her to cross the river. So the monks look at each other, and one of the monks silently bows down, lowers his shoulder, and gives indication for the woman to sit on top of his shoulder. So they get up, they walk, wade through the river, get to the other side of the river. Again, he bends down, lets the woman off, and the 2 monks continue the pilgrimage. An hour goes by, and one of the monks asked the first one, how could you carry the woman? You know, according to our lifestyle, we're not supposed to touch women. How could you do that? And the first one looks at the other and he says, I let go of that woman an hour ago, but you're still carrying her in your mind. So ask yourself, how many instances have actually gone, long gone, but I am sitting here holding on to them, giving them life with my attention and my memories, my regurgitating, as I was talking about. So it's wisdom to move away from situations that are not serving you, but it is ego, like you have said in the question, Linde, for me to be there brooding upon the suffering, because that suffering is not something that, it was not my choice. It is the other person's action. And remember, hurt people hurt people. This is a very important mantra, all of you folks. You can write this down, put it on your refrigerator. Hurt people hurt people. So when somebody is attempting to cause hurt upon somebody, so they toss the ball, it's up to me to catch the ball or not. But then the fact that they threw that ball is an indication that they're hurt in some way. No happy, peaceful, calm, completely soulful being is ever going to inflict pain on somebody else. So hurt people hurt people. So when I have this realization and don't turn that into personal trauma, I have the objectivity to realize that it is that person's suffering that is causing them to behave in certain ways. And therefore, I actually have compassion for that being versus judgment for what he or she is doing or they are doing to me, to my race, to my creed, to my gender, to whatever. Okay? Great question. So let's see. Seeking harmony and peaceful interaction with my family and continue to be gentle with myself and with all others involved. So great. So that's some of the things. Okay, fantastic. I have about 3 or 4 minutes. Does anybody have any more questions? Let's see, I've got some other comments here. I'm going to read them as you are going to type them. So there is a child called Yash who's saying, hi. Yash says, forgive your friends and family. Fantastic, Yash, do it. You're starting early. Don't forget this, though. That's one of the things I said. As you grow older, people actually become less wise and they tend to hold on. So be sure that you're not doing that. Be sure that you keep that inner child in you, that forgiveness and letting go and being light. Because we refuse to let go, we want to carry the overloaded sack of stinking rotten potatoes. I like that analogy, stinking rotten potatoes. Yes, you indeed. We carry all kinds of rotten stuff. Okay, I got a couple more questions here. On a more familiar granular level, when you ask us to feel these emotions, are we recalling thoughts or feelings, physical sensation in the body, or both? Great question. So you see, the interesting thing about trauma is I've noticed that the mind tends to forget. So the mind is actually, it's interesting, the computer is very akin to the creation of the workings of the mind, right? So there is the subconscious memory and the conscious memory. So if you think about it, the analogy is that the hard drive, right? There's the hard drive, or now what we have SSD drives, and then there is the RAM. Rapid access memory is this conscious memory. So the capacity of the conscious memory is actually quite small compared to the vast database of the hard drive. So also in the human workings, there is this concept of when I feel a certain attack by somebody, for all the reasons, the 7 reasons I gave you before, I internalize it. And sometimes that RAM gets flushed out because there's other things have happened in your life. You've moved on, in terms of at least your mental space, you moved on. But the body holds on to the trauma. Now, you might have all heard or watched documentaries where water has memory. And think about it, we are 70% of our body is water. So our body retains memory of past trauma. So when I sit in meditation, a lot of times you feel the unease, you feel the irritation, the discomfort, just the bodily unsettledness. Where does that come from? It is that stuff that you're asking, that at the granular level, it is your past trauma that you have not healed. And healing comes in many ways. Meditation is one of the ways, exercise, going out into nature, touch, massage, for example, that's one thing. Hugging, you must have heard about the oxytocin that is released when you actually, why do we hug when somebody is going through a tough time or lost a loved one, whatever that circumstance may be, is because you give them, first of all, the gift of your positive energy, but also the hugging process in itself releases oxytocin for both the parties that are in the embrace. So these are all methods that you could use to actually release this trauma that is being held by the memory of the body. It's a great question there. Another question, detachment is hell of hard for me. Let us meditate and that. I think you mean let us meditate on that. Detachment is hard. And, so one of the things that I talk a lot about in my meditation, a lot of my exercises, whether it's in these series, but also I've got over 100 meditations on my different mobile apps that I'm on. And a lot of it is about that thing of being the detached observer, that being separate, first of all, from the issue. There's the issue and then there's you. And we often confuse the two, the role and the responsibility, right? When we forget that we are a soul playing a role at a given point in time in which we have a particular single or multiple responsibilities, when you forget all of this, when you completely make that into a complete mash, and we identify ourselves with both the role and the responsibility, then we are very, very difficult for us to see objectively the right thing to do, and to see objectively in what is actually happening with all the parties involved, all the energies that are flying around. So it's very, very important. So one of the things about the meditation, Sakshi Drishta is the Hindi word for it. So this is an ancient phrase we've been talked about for thousands of years. So the ability to see yourself as a detached observer, looking at your situation, just even your life, whatever just happened, but from a third person perspective, gives you immense clarity on what is the right way to respond versus react to a situation. So absolutely, that's a very, very important thing. So folks, so that's the end of the questions, also the end of our time. Thank you for hanging in here. Like I said, please feel free to make further suggestions on topics. And I shall see you all same time, same place, same channel a week from today. Until then, be well, stay healthy, and stay happy. Have a good day.